I, 26F, always believed that a wedding day was the beginning of a story. It was supposed to be the first page of a brand new book, filled with hope and promise. I never imagined that mine would be the final chapter of a lie, the explosive conclusion to a betrayal so deep it felt like it had hollowed out my soul. The night before my wedding, my mother slept with my fiancé, Liam. She did it in the guest room of the house I had bought, the house we were supposed to fill with a family and a future. And I knew because I had watched it happen on a tiny screen, a silent movie of my life imploding. The morning of my wedding dawned bright and painfully clear. Sunlight streamed through the window of my childhood bedroom, the same room where I had dreamed of this very day for years. But the light felt wrong, like a spotlight in an interrogation room. Downstairs, I could hear the cheerful clatter of my bridesmaids getting ready. My best friend, Chloe, 26F, was directing traffic, her voice a soothing balm of normalcy that only made the acid in my stomach churn faster. They thought I was nervous. They thought the quiet tremor in my hands was just pre-wedding jitters. They had no idea that I was not a bride preparing to meet her groom. I was a general preparing for war. My mother, Eleanor, swept into the room a little while later. She was already dressed in her mother-of-the-bride gown, a shimmering silver creation that was perhaps a little too striking, a little too close to white. She always had to be the second most beautiful woman in the room, even if the most beautiful was supposed to be her own daughter. She fussed with a stray curl in my hair, her fingers cool against my skin. The touch made me want to recoil, to scream, to shatter the perfect, serene mask she wore. "My beautiful girl," she whispered, her voice thick with fake emotion. "Are you ready for the best day of your life?" I met her eyes in the mirror. They were a cool, placid blue, the same as mine, but hers held a chilling emptiness. I saw nothing of the love a mother should have for her daughter on her wedding day. I saw only triumph. She thought she had won. She thought she had taken the two most important things in my life, my future and my husband. She just did not know that she was only holding on to the ashes. "I'm ready," I said, and my voice was surprisingly steady. That was the one thing she had never counted on. My strength. She had always mistaken my kindness for weakness, my patience for passivity. Today, she would learn the difference. The plan had formed during the long, dark hours of the night, after I had watched the security footage. After the shock had subsided and been replaced by a cold, hard resolve that felt like a block of ice in my chest. I sat on my bed, the white lace of my wedding dress draped over a chair nearby, and I thought. Canceling was not enough. A quiet, dignified exit was not enough. They did not deserve dignity. They had committed their sin in the darkness, in the quiet corners of my home, believing they were safe. I decided I would drag their betrayal into the light, into the most sacred and public space I could imagine, the church, in front of everyone we knew. I called Chloe into my room, closing the door behind her. The other bridesmaids were busy with the photographer, their laughter echoing from the garden below. Chloe took one look at my face, and her own smile faded. She knew me better than anyone. She knew this was not nerves. "What is it?" she asked, her voice low. "What's wrong?" I did not say anything at first. I just unlocked my phone and played the video. I did not need to explain. The timestamp in the corner read 2:14 a.m. The footage was from the camera in my living room, the one Liam had insisted we get for security. It showed the front door opening. It showed Liam and my mother stumbling in, laughing quietly. It showed him kicking off his shoes. It showed her running a hand down his chest. And then it caught their words, whispered but crystal clear thanks to the microphone. "Are you sure she's asleep?" my mother had whispered. "Positive," Liam had replied, his voice slurred. "She passed out hours ago, exhausted from all the planning." "Good," Eleanor had said, her voice dropping to a seductive purr. "Then she won't mind if I borrow you for a little while." The video showed them kissing, a long, greedy kiss that was nothing like the chaste pecks I had ever seen my mother give anyone. Then, hand in hand, they walked out of the frame, towards the guest bedroom at the end of the hall. The clip ended. Chloe stared at the phone in my hand, her face pale. She looked from the screen to me and back again. She opened her mouth, then closed it. There were no words. There was nothing to say that could possibly make sense of what we had just seen. "I am so sorry," she finally whispered, her eyes filling with tears for me. "Don't be," I said, and the coldness in my own voice surprised me. "I'm not sad anymore. I'm just done." That was when I told her my plan. I told her I was going through with it. I was going to walk down that aisle, stand at that altar, and I was going to burn their world to the ground. She did not try to talk me out of it. She just nodded, a fierce loyalty shining in her eyes. "What do you need me to do?" she asked. The first step was securing the evidence. I had already downloaded the video file to my phone, but I needed more. I sent it to my cloud storage. I emailed it to a private account. I also saved it onto a small, discreet USB drive that I tucked into the tiny satin purse that matched my dress. Then I had a task for Chloe. "The reception has a big screen for a photo slideshow," I said. "I need you to get this video to the AV guy. Tell him it's a surprise for Liam. A special message from the bride." Chloe nodded again, her expression grim but determined. "Consider it done. He won't know what hit him." The rest of the morning passed in a blur of surreal preparations. The makeup artist commented on how calm I was. The hairstylist marveled at how still I sat. They mistook my shock for serenity. My mother hovered nearby, a constant, suffocating presence. She kept touching my shoulder, adjusting my veil, her every gesture a dagger twisting in my gut. She was playing the part of the proud mother so perfectly, and the performance was nauseating. "You look like an angel," she said, her voice catching. I looked at her reflection next to mine. "I feel like I'm about to pass judgment," I replied, my voice soft. She just smiled, missing the venom in my words entirely, or perhaps choosing to ignore it. She was so confident in her deception, so certain of her power over me and over Liam, that the idea of me fighting back was completely alien to her. The car ride to the church was silent. My stepfather, Robert, drove. He was a quiet man who had long ago learned that the easiest path was to let Eleanor have her way. He was her greatest enabler, the silent partner in her emotional tyranny. He patted my hand, oblivious. "Big day," he said, smiling kindly. I just nodded, my stomach a knot of ice and fire. I wondered how he would feel in an hour when the perfect little family he thought he was a part of was revealed to be a hollow fraud. When we arrived, the church was already full. The pews were packed with friends and family, faces beaming with happiness for us. They were all here to witness a celebration of love. They had no idea they were about to witness an execution. As I stood in the vestibule, hearing the organ music swell, my heart began to pound. This was it. There was no turning back. Robert took my arm, ready to walk me down the aisle. "Ready, sweetheart?" he asked. I took a deep breath. I looked past him, through the open doors, and saw Liam standing at the altar. He was handsome in his tuxedo, a nervous smile on his face. He looked out at the crowd, and for a fleeting moment, his eyes met mine. He looked guilty. He looked like a man who knew he was a fraud, but was hoping to get away with it. Next to him stood his best man, looking proud. In the front pew, my mother was dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief, the very picture of maternal pride. The sight of them, so close together, so complicit in their betrayal, solidified my resolve. The ice in my chest became steel. "I'm ready," I said to Robert. "Let's give them a day they'll never forget." He smiled, thinking I was talking about the joy of the occasion. He had no idea how right he was. The doors opened wide, and the music swelled. Every head turned towards me. I put one foot in front of the other, my hand resting lightly on my stepfather's arm, and began my long walk towards the man who had shattered my heart and the woman who had helped him do it. My face was a serene mask, but inside, I was counting down the seconds until I could finally speak my truth. The aisle felt a mile long. Each step was a deliberate act of will, a march toward a terrible, necessary reckoning. As I walked, I saw the faces of our guests. My aunts and uncles, my cousins, Liam's parents, our friends from college, my colleagues from work. They were all smiling, some of them tearing up. They were here to celebrate a union they believed in. They had bought us gifts, traveled from all over the country, and dressed in their finest clothes to honor a love that was a complete and utter lie. A wave of guilt washed over me, but I pushed it down. They deserved the truth, too. They were victims of this deception, just as much as I was. They deserved to know who they were really celebrating. When I reached the altar, Robert placed my hand in Liam's. Liam's hand was clammy, his grip a little too tight. He leaned in to whisper in my ear as the priest began to speak. "You look breathtaking," he murmured. I just looked at him. I did not smile. I did not say thank you. I simply held his gaze, letting him see the coldness in my eyes. A flicker of confusion crossed his face, but it was gone as quickly as it came. He turned his attention back to the priest, assuming my silence was just a case of bridal nerves. He was so arrogant, so certain he had me fooled. The ceremony began. The priest, Father Michael, was a kind, elderly man who had known my family for years. His voice was warm and comforting as he spoke of the sanctity of marriage, of trust, of fidelity. Every word was a sharp, painful irony. I stood there, a statue in white, listening to a sermon about a life that was no longer possible for me. I could feel my mother's eyes on me from the front row. I could feel her pride, her smug satisfaction. She was watching her masterpiece unfold. She had orchestrated this whole thing, I was sure of it now. She had seduced Liam, not just for a moment of sordid pleasure, but to ensure her control over me was absolute. A son-in-law she had a hold on was far more useful than one who was loyal only to me. The ceremony moved forward, each traditional step a new layer of hypocrisy. We exchanged vows we had written ourselves. When it was Liam's turn, he spoke of his undying love, his promise to honor and cherish me for all of his days. His voice was smooth, practiced. He sounded so sincere that for a terrifying second, I almost believed him. But then I remembered the video, his whispered words in the dark, and the illusion shattered. The man in front of me was a stranger, a performer reading a script. Then it was my turn. I took a breath, my own written vows clutched in my hand. I had practiced them for weeks, filled with words of love and hope. I could not bring myself to read them now. Instead, I looked directly at Liam. "I promise to be true to you," I said, my voice clear and steady, "in good times and in bad, in sickness and in health. I promise to give you the honesty you deserve." The last line was not in my original vows. A small, sharp addition just for him. He blinked, a slight frown touching his lips. He knew something was off, but he could not place it. He was a cornered animal that could smell danger, but could not yet see the hunter. We exchanged rings. The cold metal sliding onto my finger felt like a shackle. I looked down at it, a symbol of a promise that was already broken beyond repair. My hand was shaking again, but this time it was not from fear. It was from anticipation. The moment was getting closer. Finally, Father Michael reached the pivotal part of the ceremony. He smiled benevolently at the congregation. "And so," he declared, "by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife." He paused, turning to Liam. "You may kiss the bride." This was not the moment I had planned. My plan was for later, during the part where he would ask if anyone objected. But as Liam leaned in, his face coming toward mine, a wave of revulsion so strong washed over me that I could not stop myself. I turned my head away. Liam froze, his lips puckering for a kiss that never came. A confused murmur rippled through the church. He pulled back, his eyes wide with shock and embarrassment. "What are you doing?" he hissed, his voice a low, angry whisper only I could hear. "I can't," I whispered back. "I can't kiss a liar." His face paled. "What are you talking about?" Father Michael looked between us, his kind face creased with confusion. "Is everything all right, my child?" he asked me gently. I turned to face him, and then I turned to face the hundreds of people watching us. I took the microphone from the stand next to the altar. Its weight was solid and real in my hand. This was real. This was happening. "No, Father," I said, my voice ringing through the silent church, amplified and clear. "Everything is not all right." I looked at Liam, whose face was now a mask of dawning horror. I looked to the front pew, at my mother, whose smile had frozen on her face. She was starting to understand. The triumph in her eyes was being replaced by panic. "Before we continue," I said, my voice gaining strength with every word, "I believe there's something everyone here needs to see. We're going to show a slideshow of our memories during the reception, but I have a special video I'd like to share right now. A little glimpse into what happened last night. Chloe, if you would." Across the church, I saw Chloe give a subtle nod to the AV technician in the balcony. On the two large screens on either side of the altar, the ones that had been displaying a static image of our engagement photo, the image flickered. And then the video started to play. The living room of my house appeared on the screens. My house. Our house. The silence in the church was absolute, a heavy, breathless thing. People craned their necks, confused, trying to understand what they were seeing. And then the front door opened. Liam and my mother, Eleanor, appeared on screen. A collective gasp went through the congregation. They were disheveled, clearly intoxicated, and far too comfortable with each other. The audio kicked in, their whispered conversation echoing through the hallowed space. "Are you sure she's asleep?" My mother's voice, amplified and undeniable. "Positive," Liam's voice replied. "She passed out hours ago." "Good," my mother purred. "Then she won't mind if I borrow you for a little while." The kiss was the thing that broke the spell. The sight of my fiancé and my own mother locked in a passionate, desperate embrace on the giant screens was too much. People gasped, shouted. I heard Liam's mother let out a strangled sob. I saw my stepfather, Robert, rise halfway out of his seat, his face ashen with disbelief. But the video was not done. It showed them walking away, hand in hand, towards the guest room. The screen went black. For a few seconds, the only sound in the church was the horrified, ragged breathing of 200 people. Then I spoke again, my voice cutting through the chaos like a knife. "So no, I don't think I will kiss the groom," I said, looking directly at Liam. His face had crumpled. He looked like a child who had been caught, his arrogance and charm stripped away, leaving only a pathetic, weak man. "And I think we can all agree that this marriage is not sanctified by God." I turned to my mother. Her face was a grotesque canvas of shock and fury. Her mask of perfection had been shattered into a million pieces. She was exposed, humiliated in front of everyone whose opinion she valued. Her social standing, her reputation as the perfect mother and wife, all of it was gone, incinerated in the space of a 30-second video clip. "I hope you were worth it," I said to her, my voice dripping with contempt. Then I did the only thing I could do. I took the heavy, diamond ring off my finger, the one Liam had placed there only minutes before. I held it out to him. He was frozen, unable to move or speak. I let it drop to the marble floor of the altar. It landed with a small, sharp clink that echoed in the cavernous silence. I turned my back on him. I turned my back on my mother. I looked out at the sea of shocked faces, found Chloe's, and she was already moving, coming towards the aisle. I started to walk. I did not run. I walked slowly, deliberately, my head held high, down the same aisle I had just walked up with so much false hope. The guests parted for me as if I were royalty, their faces a mixture of pity, horror, and a strange, dawning respect. As I reached the back of the church, the silence finally broke. A cacophony of voices erupted behind me. Shouting, crying, accusations. But I did not turn around. I did not want to see the fallout. I had lit the fuse. I had walked away from the explosion. That was enough. Chloe was by my side, her arm around my shoulders. She pushed open the heavy oak doors of the church, and the bright, unforgiving sunlight of the afternoon hit my face. I took a deep, shuddering breath of fresh air. It was over. The lie was over. My old life was over. And as I stood on the steps of the church, in my beautiful white dress, a bride with no groom, I did not feel sad. I did not feel heartbroken. I felt free. The weight that I had been carrying all morning, all night, was gone. I had taken their secret and made it their shame. And in the silence that followed the screaming, I had finally found my own voice. The moments after I left the church were a chaotic whirlwind. Chloe bundled me into the back of the waiting limousine, the one that was supposed to whisk me and Liam away to our reception. The driver, a man with a kind, weathered face, looked at me in the rearview mirror, his expression a mixture of confusion and deep sympathy. "Where to, miss?" he asked, his voice gentle. "Just drive," Chloe told him. "Anywhere but here." As the car pulled away from the curb, I looked back at the church. People were spilling out onto the steps, their formal wedding attire a stark contrast to the ugly, chaotic scene unfolding. I saw Liam's father yelling at my stepfather, Robert, whose face was slack with shock. I saw Liam's mother being comforted by a group of women, her body shaking with sobs. And I saw Liam, standing alone in the doorway of the church, looking small and lost. My mother was nowhere to be seen. She had probably fled, unable to face the public crucifixion she had so richly deserved. I felt a grim satisfaction. This was her legacy now. This moment of public disgrace would follow her forever. My phone started buzzing relentlessly in my small purse. Text messages and missed calls flooded the screen. Liam.
Mom.
Robert. Liam's parents. A dozen different numbers, all demanding an explanation, an apology, a retraction. They wanted me to fix the mess that they had made. I turned the phone off and dropped it back into my purse. I was done talking to them. I had said everything I needed to say on the big screen. "What do we do now?" I asked Chloe, my voice feeling raw. "Now," she said, squeezing my hand, "we go to your house, you get out of this dress, and we order the biggest, greasiest pizza we can find. And then we plan your honeymoon. The one you're taking with me." A small, watery laugh escaped me. It felt strange, like a sound from a different person. A honeymoon with Chloe. The idea was absurd, and yet it was perfect. "Where should we go?"
I asked. "Somewhere warm," she said.
"Somewhere with lots of sand and cocktails with little umbrellas. Somewhere they have never heard of Eleanor or Liam." When we got back to my house, the place felt tainted. The living room, where the camera had captured their betrayal, seemed cold and unwelcoming. The guest room door was closed, and I felt a shudder go through me. I never wanted to step foot in that room again. Chloe, ever practical, went straight to my closet and pulled out a pair of sweatpants and a hoodie. "Change," she ordered. "I'll handle the food." Slipping out of the heavy, ornate wedding dress was like shedding a skin. It was a costume for a life I was no longer going to live. I left it in a heap on the floor, a white casualty of a war I had not started but had been forced to finish. In my comfortable clothes, I felt more like myself than I had in months. The bride was gone. I was just me again. The pizza arrived, and we sat on the floor of my bedroom, eating straight from the box. We did not talk about what had happened. We did not need to. We just sat in comfortable silence, the normalcy of the moment a welcome anchor in the storm of the day. Later that evening, my phone, which I had reluctantly turned back on, rang with a number I did not recognize. I hesitated, then answered, putting it on speaker. "Hello. It's your Aunt Carol," a familiar voice said, sounding strained. "Are you all right, dear?" Aunt Carol was my mother's younger sister. She was a no-nonsense woman who had always treated me with a kindness that felt far more genuine than my mother's performative affection. "I'm okay, Aunt Carol," I said. "Okay? Honey, what you did today, it was something else," she said, and I could hear a note of admiration in her voice. "I just wanted to call and say, I believe you.
I've seen the way your mother is.
I've seen the way she looks at men who aren't her husband. I just never thought she would." Her voice trailed off. "I know," I said quietly. "Me neither." "Your stepfather is a wreck," she continued. "He's trying to defend her, of course. Saying you must have misunderstood, that the video was faked. But nobody's buying it. We all saw their faces. Eleanor locked herself in her room and won't come out. The whole family is in an uproar. Let them be, I said, a weariness settling over me. It has nothing to do with me anymore. Good for you, Aunt Carol said firmly. You did the right thing. It was brave. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. If you need anything, and I mean anything at all, you call me. Thank you, Aunt Carol, I said, and I meant it. In the wreckage of my family, finding one solid piece of support felt like a miracle. The next call was not so pleasant. It was from Robert, my stepfather. His voice was cold, furious. Do you have any idea what you have done? He snarled, without any preamble. Yes, I said calmly. I told the truth. You humiliated us. You aired our private family business in front of the entire world. Your mother is destroyed, he yelled. My mother destroyed herself, I countered, my own anger starting to rise. She destroyed my wedding. She destroyed my trust. And you stood by and let her do it. You have been letting her get away with her cruelty for years. You are just as much to blame as she is. That is not fair, he sputtered. She loves you. No, she doesn't, I said, the words sharp and final. She loves controlling me. And that is over.
Do not call me again.
You are no longer my family. I hung up before he could respond. I blocked his number, my mother's number, and every other number associated with that side of my life. I was pruning my family tree, cutting off the diseased branches. The final call I answered was from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me pick up. Hello. It's me, a broken voice whispered. It was Liam. I was silent. Chloe, sensing the shift, sat up straighter, her eyes fixed on me. Please, he begged, his voice cracking. Please just let me explain. It wasn't what it looked like. It was exactly what it looked like, Liam, I said, my voice devoid of any emotion. I have it on video, remember? She came onto me, he cried, his voice pathetic and whining. I was drunk. I didn't know what I was doing. She manipulated me. You know how she is. Yes, I do know how she is, I said. And I also know you. You had a choice, Liam. You always have a choice. And you chose her. You chose to betray me, in my own home, the night before our wedding. There is nothing to explain. There is only the truth. I love you, he sobbed. I still love you. We can fix this. We can go to counseling. We can move away. No, we can't, I said, and the finality in my voice was absolute. There is no we anymore. You made sure of that. Goodbye, Liam. I hung up and blocked his number, too. I felt nothing. No sadness, no anger, just a vast, empty space where my love for him used to be. He and my mother had burned it all down, and now they were trying to warm their hands on the embers. But there was nothing left for them. The next few days were a blur of logistics. I called the caterer, the florist, the band. I explained that the wedding was off and that the reception was canceled. To my surprise, most of them were incredibly understanding. The story of what had happened had spread like wildfire through our small town. The church community was buzzing. Father Michael had apparently given a sermon the next day about the sanctity of truth, however painful it might be. I had paid for the reception in full. Instead of asking for a refund, I called the caterer with a new plan. I wanted to deliver all the food to the local women's shelter, I said, and send the bill for any extra costs to my mother. Consider it her donation. The wedding gifts that had been delivered to my house were another problem. Chloe and I spent an entire afternoon writing thank you notes that were also announcements. Thank you so much for the beautiful gift, each note read. Although the wedding did not proceed, I appreciate your kindness. The gift will be donated to a charity supporting victims of betrayal. I wanted every single person who had witnessed my humiliation to know that I was not the victim here. I was the survivor. The biggest task was the house. It was my house. I had bought it with my own money, a down payment saved from years of hard work. Liam was supposed to move in after the wedding. Now, the thought of living there, with the memory of what had happened in the guest room, was unbearable. I called a real estate agent the next day. I told her I wanted to sell and I wanted to sell fast. "I'll take the first good offer," I said. "I just want it gone." A week after the wedding that never was, Chloe and I were on a plane to Bali. I had used the money I would have spent on the wedding to buy 2 first-class tickets. As the plane took off, leaving my old life behind on the ground below, I felt a sense of peace I had not felt in years. I had lost a fiancé and a mother, but I had gained something far more valuable: myself. The sun was warm in Bali. The beaches were beautiful. The cocktails were strong. Chloe and I spent our days reading, swimming, and talking about everything and nothing. We never mentioned Liam or my mother. Their names were forbidden. They belonged to a different world, a different lifetime. One afternoon, as we were lying on the beach, I got an email from my real estate agent. There was an offer on the house. It was a good one, a cash offer from a family that wanted to move in quickly. I accepted it without a second thought. I signed the documents electronically from a beach chair, half a world away.
I was cutting the last tie to my past.
When I got back home, I moved into a small, new apartment in a different part of the city. It was clean, bright, and held no memories. It was a blank slate. I started to rebuild my life, piece by piece. I focused on my work. I spent time with friends who had proven their loyalty. I reconnected with Aunt Carol, who became a steady, supportive presence in my life. She told me that my mother and Robert had moved away. They had sold their house and left town in the middle of the night, unable to bear the shame and the gossip. My mother had become a pariah. Her friends had abandoned her. The social status she had worked so hard to build had crumbled to dust. Robert, ever the loyal enabler, had gone with her, choosing his toxic wife over his own dignity. I felt a flicker of pity for him, but it was quickly extinguished. He had made his bed. As for Liam, his life had also imploded. His parents, devout and traditional, were deeply ashamed of him. They had apparently told him he was no longer welcome in their home. He had lost his job, the scandal had somehow reached his employer, and he was let go. He had tried to contact me again, sending desperate emails to my work address, but I had set up a filter to send them straight to the trash. His pleas for forgiveness were meaningless to me. Forgiveness was for people who made mistakes. What he and my mother had done was not a mistake. It was a calculated act of war. And they had lost. Months passed. The seasons changed. The sharp edges of the betrayal began to soften. It was no longer a raw, open wound, but a scar. A reminder of a battle I had fought and won. I was happier than I had ever been. I was free from my mother's constant criticism and manipulation. I was free from Liam's weak, easily swayed affections. I was just free. One day, I was having coffee with Chloe when she looked at me with a serious expression. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "How you did it?" In front of everyone. I thought about it for a moment. I thought about the shocked faces in the church, the public humiliation, the sheer, brutal finality of it all. "No," I said, and the certainty in my voice was absolute. "I don't regret it for a second. They built a private hell for me, all while smiling to my face. The only thing I regret is not seeing it sooner. What I did in that church wasn't about revenge. It was about liberation. I wasn't just exposing them. I was setting myself free. And I knew, in that moment, that my story was not an ending after all. It was not the final chapter. It was, in its own strange, explosive way, a beginning. The beginning of a life lived on my own terms, in the bright, unforgiving light of the truth. My mother had always craved the spotlight. On my wedding day, I had finally given it to her. And I had walked away, leaving her and Liam to burn in its glare. The church had fallen silent that day, stunned by the truth. But I had walked out into the sunshine, ready to make my own noise, ready to write my own story. A story where I was the only author, the only hero, and it was going to be a bestseller. The process of disentangling my life from theirs was more complicated than I had anticipated. It was not just about blocking numbers and selling a house. It was a meticulous, emotional excavation. Every photo album had to be purged. Every gift he had ever given me was boxed up and donated. Every shared memory felt like a ghost that needed to be exorcised. Chloe was my patient co-pilot through it all, helping me sort through the debris of my former life without judgment. One evening, we were going through a box of old college memorabilia when I found a letter. It was from my mother, written to me during my freshman year. It was full of her usual backhanded compliments and subtle manipulations. "I'm so proud of your independence," she had written, "but don't forget who got you there. A daughter's gratitude is a mother's greatest reward." Reading it now, with the clarity of hindsight, I could see the pattern so clearly. Her love had always been conditional, a transaction. I had been her project, her possession, and my impending marriage to Liam had represented, in her mind, a transfer of ownership that she could not abide. So she had sabotaged it in the most intimate way possible, to prove that she still held the ultimate power. "She never saw you as a person," Chloe said, watching me read the letter. "She saw you as an extension of herself. And Liam," I added, folding the letter and tossing it into the donation box, "saw me as a meal ticket." They were a perfect match. The legal side of things was surprisingly straightforward. Since we were not married, separating our assets was simple. The house was in my name. The car was in my name. The joint savings account we had opened for wedding expenses had most of my money in it. I closed it, transferred my portion to a new account, and had a cashier's check for Liam's small contribution mailed to his parents' address. I included a note. It contained only 2 words. For services rendered, it was petty, I knew, but it felt deeply satisfying. A few weeks after I returned from Bali, I received a certified letter. It was from a law firm representing my mother. My hands trembled as I opened it. It was a cease and desist letter, filled with legal jargon. It accused me of defamation, of causing emotional distress, and of orchestrating a malicious public campaign against her. It demanded that I issue a public apology and retract my slanderous accusations, otherwise they would pursue legal action. I laughed. A real, hearty laugh that came from deep in my belly. The sheer audacity was breathtaking. She was the one who had committed the ultimate betrayal, yet she was trying to paint herself as the victim. It was her signature move, a tactic she had used my entire life. Blame, deflect, and reverse the roles of victim and aggressor. I took the letter to a lawyer my company had on retainer. She was a sharp, no-nonsense woman in her 50s, named Ms. Davis. She read the letter, her expression unreadable. When she finished, she looked up at me over the top of her glasses. "Is the video you showed authentic?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "Completely. Can you prove its authenticity? Timestamps, original file data?" "Yes," I said. "I have the original file from the security system's hard drive." She smiled, a thin, predatory smile. "Then she doesn't have a case. Truth is an absolute defense against defamation. In fact," she continued, leaning forward, "I would argue that she is the one who has caused you emotional distress. The cancellation of a wedding, the public humiliation stemming from her actions, that has a quantifiable cost." Ms. Davis drafted a response that was a work of art. It stated, in no uncertain terms, that we rejected their claims. It pointed out that any emotional distress my mother had suffered was a direct result of her own actions being brought to light. It then went on to detail the costs I had incurred from the canceled wedding, the non-refundable deposits, the dress, the emotional and psychological damages. The letter concluded by stating that if they chose to pursue this frivolous lawsuit, we would not only vigorously defend it, but we would also file a countersuit for the full amount of these damages, and we would subpoena both my mother and Liam to testify under oath about the events of that night. The video, the letter added as a final flourish, would be entered as evidence. We sent the letter. We never heard from her lawyer again. The threat had been hollow, a last, desperate attempt to control the narrative. She had backed down the moment she was faced with a real consequence, the one thing she could not manipulate, the truth under oath. Life began to settle into a new, quieter rhythm. I found joy in simple things, the solitude of my new apartment, the freedom to make my own decisions without consulting anyone, the strength of my friendships. I was healing. One day, I ran into Liam's mother at the grocery store. I tried to turn my cart and go down another aisle, but she saw me. She approached me hesitantly, her face etched with a sadness that seemed to have aged her 10 years. "Hello," she said softly. "Mrs. Johnson," I replied, my voice neutral. I just wanted to say, "I am so sorry," she said, her eyes welling up with tears. "For everything. For what my son did. For the shame he brought on you, on all of us." I was taken aback by her sincerity. I had expected anger, or at least a defense of her son. "He's not the boy I raised," she continued, her voice trembling. "I don't know who he is anymore. He's staying with his brother. He won't talk to us. He blames everyone but himself. He blames you for overreacting. He blames your mother for seducing him. He had a choice," I said, the words coming out more gently than I intended. "I know," she said, wiping a tear from her cheek. "A man always has a choice. I hope you are doing all right. You were like a daughter to me." "I am," I said, and I was surprised to find that I meant it. "I'm doing much better now." She nodded, a sad smile on her face. "You are a strong young woman. You deserve a good man. A man worthy of you." We stood in silence for a moment, the hum of the grocery store's refrigerators filling the space between us. Then she simply touched my arm lightly and walked away. That encounter closed a chapter for me. Her validation, her acknowledgement of her son's fault, was something I did not know I needed. It freed me from any lingering, misplaced guilt I might have had about the pain I had caused their family. The pain had been caused by Liam, not by me. A year after the wedding, I was in a different place, literally and figuratively. I had been promoted at work, a position that required me to relocate to a new city. The move was a welcome one, a chance to truly start fresh, where no one knew my story unless I chose to tell them. I sold the furniture from my old life and bought new things for my new apartment. I explored my new city, found new favorite coffee shops, new parks to walk in, new friends. I was building a life that was entirely my own, on a foundation of my own making. Sometimes, late at night, I would think about them. I would wonder where my mother and Robert had gone. I would wonder what had become of Liam. But the thoughts were fleeting, like watching a movie about someone else's life. The pain was gone, replaced by a distant, clinical curiosity. They were characters in a story that had ended long ago. The anniversary of the non-wedding came and went. I did not even realize the date until a few days later. Chloe sent me a text. "Happy Liberation Day," I smiled. That was exactly what it was. It was about 2 years after the incident when I finally saw him again. It was a complete coincidence. I was back in my old hometown for a work conference. I was in a hotel bar having a drink with some colleagues when I saw him across the room. It was Liam. He looked diminished. He had lost weight. His clothes were rumpled. The confident, charming swagger he used to have was gone. He was sitting alone at the bar, staring into a glass of whiskey. He looked tired and sad. Our eyes met across the room. A flicker of recognition, then shock, registered on his face. He stood up, as if to come over to me, but then he seemed to think better of it. He just stood there, watching me. I did not feel anger. I did not feel hatred. I did not feel anything at all. He was a stranger, a ghost from a past that no longer belonged to me. I gave him a small, polite nod, a nod you would give a distant acquaintance you barely remembered. Then I turned my back on him and went back to the conversation with my colleagues, laughing at a joke one of them had made. I did not look back to see if he was still watching. It did not matter. His opinion of me, his presence, his very existence had ceased to be relevant to my life. That was the true victory, not the public shaming in the church, not the financial ruin or the social exile they had suffered. The true victory was this: indifference. The true victory was the complete and total peace I felt in my own skin, in my own life, a life that was thriving not in spite of them, but because they were no longer in it. I had silenced the church that day, but the more important thing was what happened after. In the quiet that followed, I had learned to listen to my own voice. I had learned to trust my own instincts. I had learned that I was strong enough to survive the deepest betrayals and build a new life from the ashes. They had tried to write my story for me, to trap me in a tragedy of their own making. But I had taken the pen back, and I was writing a much, much better ending. An ending where I was happy, whole, and free. And they were just a footnote in a chapter one had long since finished.